Keretismata daimon. Events of the weekend, which for the most part center around incredible acts of violence in Israel, Palestine, have inspired me to move forward with something I had been thinking about for a while, and I'd mentioned, I think, a couple of times, and that's talking about Saharasia, the concept of Saharasia, as well as the book of the same name, and the ideas in there and how they relate to what's going on in the world, and especially the events of the weekend, if you're watching it, that, and are horrified and mortified like I am. Just absolutely horrible. My heart goes out to everyone who is experiencing suffering from that, and the images and actions and everything are just animalistic and barbaric. But I think what I hope to do here is add a little light to the subject so you can understand why, not only why this happened, but why this happens all the time, and why this has been happening for thousands and thousands of years. And we just absolutely, no matter how much we try to talk about peace, love, and understanding, it's always warfare that's going on. And I know at this point I'm not the first person to suggest or to state how curious it is that the most secure nation in the world, that has, I mean, they have borders and walls, and the most intense, Mossad security system, the strongest army in the world, that a breach like this was allowed to happen. It's just, I don't know, it's very curious. Anyhow, not to get into that. But I want to talk about Saharasia. So this is the book Saharasia by James DeMayo. I think you can get this on Amazon. It's Saharasia, the 4000 BCE origins of child abuse, sex repression, warfare, and social violence in the deserts of the old world. So James DeMayo is one of the last great students of Wilhelm Reich. He went to his university experience, was all like, he did his doctorate on validating Wilhelm Reich's cloud busting theories of the orgone. DeMayo is responsible for a lot of the cloud busting devices and different orgone devices being available on the market in recent times. So he's definitely a Reichian in his orientation. So what he basically did in this book is he correlated. So I'm going to read a little bit from this. We start with 10 important questions which must be weighed heavily upon the concerned individual. They are the starting points and guiding themes for the research findings presented in this work. So 10 guiding questions. Number 1, what are the causes and ultimate sources of human violence and war? 2, why if everyone talks about world peace and loving thy neighbor, is there so much hatred and killing around the world? 3. In an era of exaggerated sexuality, why is there so much sexual misery and so little love? And why is natural sexual functioning so often cloaked and hidden? Now let me note that when he talks about exaggerated sexual behavior, that he's writing this like 20, 30 years ago. Here we go, copyright 1998. So the current sexual environment is far more exaggerated than what he was thinking of at the time. So the kind of influences he's talking about have only gotten more extreme. Number 4, why do so many political and religious leaders behave in such a hypocritical manner? And why are the most religious nations often the most bloody and violent? 5, what are the roles of politics, religion, and of the ordinary person in the cultural dynamics which produce violent societies? And 6, are humans innately violent, burdened with original sin or violent genes? Is violence simply learned, or are there other reasons related to traumatic childhood experiences? 7, do truly peaceful societies exist? Did they ever exist? 8, is there any truth to the idea, as reflected in various mythologies and religions, that there existed an ancient time of widespread peaceful societal conditions? 9, if so, what were those peaceful cultures like, and where were they located? And number 10, what specifically happened to change the face of the world so dramatically for the worse, to produce the big mess in which so much of humanity finds itself today? He went on this, he started making this study of basically all these different characteristics. And this is like the main listing of them here, but he basically divided everything into 2 broad categories of armored Patrist and unarmored Matrist. And like armored Patrist categories, behavior categories are like, or characteristics: less indulgence, less physical affection, infants traumatized, painful initiations, dominated by family, sex-segregated houses or military, restrictive sexuality, genital mutilations, female virginity taboos, things like that. Whereas like on the unarmored Matrist side, characteristics of a culture, they identify as more indulgence, more physical affection, infants not traumatized, absence of pain in initiations, children's democracies, mixed sex children's houses or age villages, permissive, pleasurable attitude to sex, absence of genital mutilations, no female virginity taboos, no intercourse taboos, adolescent lovemaking, homosexuality taboos are interesting too. They noted that in Patrist societies have way more homosexuality, and they also have a homosexuality taboo. Isn't that interesting? It's like the taboo causes more homosexuality, because in unarmored Matrist societies, absence of homosexual taboos, they don't care, but there's also very little actual homosexuality. So that's interesting. And it goes on and on. Religion in Patrist societies are obviously male father oriented, asceticism, avoidance of pleasure, pain seeking, inhibition, full-time religious specialists, male shamans, healers, strict behavior codes. In the female, or in the Matrist, unarmored Matrist societies, religions tend to be female mother-oriented, Pleasure welcomed and institutionalized, spontaneity, nature worship, no full-time religious specialists. Okay, so part-time religious specialists. Male or female shamans, healers, absence of strict codes. So I think you get the idea, the difference between Patrist and unarmored, armored Patrist and unarmored Matrist. And this terminology comes from Reich. So when he says armored Patrist, he's talking about Reich's term is of character armor that they build, that Patrism builds like this, like character armor. What I talk about a lot as personality, like the shield or facade of personality that we develop as a result of interaction in the universe. Whereas unarmored means, you know, free and open, and less concern for that sort of thing. So what he did in a nutshell is, like, they took all of these different characteristics, and first of all he put them all on a map of the world and looked at where they all fell, and they all fall in certain specific regions. And then the next thing he did is he tracked it over time, how these characteristics spread over the globe over time. And basically what he got was the indication that armored Patrism appears and he used objective means to find this. He used, like, his study for, like, figuring out the geography, all this. It's based on other studies that had no interest in Reich or any of this personality type theory. So there's like definitely an objective quality to this. I mean, his thesis is like the first couple of pages here, and all the rest of this is like all the research that he did on it. I mean, this is like a research academic type book. It's not like light reading. But it's so just so you understand that he definitely, this is very academically focused, and he minded his P's and Q's as far as like research, as far as research goes. I remember I have just enough of a fragments of my memory from like sociology and social research courses and experiences that I had that I can say that. So I'm going to continue to read like some of this. Early in my study, a major climactic expression was observed in the regional distributions of human behavior and social institutions. A general association was observed between desert environments and emotional inhibition, with a corresponding association between rainforest regions and a more fluid, expressive emotional life. Further investigation gradually revealed the simplistic climactic correlation to be only partially true. Correlation does not equal causation. But something quite profound had been uncovered in my approach. Additional work clarified the relationships. When standard cross-cultural data on human behavior were reviewed in a geographically explicit manner, that is, with the data actually plotted on maps, rather than being reviewed only in tabular numeric form, several startling but clear-cut patterns appeared on the world maps I had created. Human violence appeared to have a specific time and place of origins on the earth. Antisocial violence was not distributed worldwide at all times in the past. Furthermore, it was learned the origins of violence was precisely timed to a major historical epoch of climate change from relatively wet towards dry conditions. So what this means is that Patrist cultures started out in what he calls the Saharasia area. And that's the area of the Sahara Desert up into part of Asia, and that this area was desertified, went through desertification very early on, and that those harsh conditions are what caused these social behaviors to arise. And then, because they would, and those tribes eventually like move out of those areas, that in neighboring fertile areas, that those behaviors would be passed on. The thing I like about this book is it also explains lots of things that you find in certain esoteric literature, especially the works of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, and the idea of negative emotions, that negativity gets like passed on from people like a disease. It's like a learned behavior that people acquire, and once they pick it up, it becomes like a mechanical sort of function. So he continues here, my research blended the cross-cultural approach of the anthropologist with the spatial analytical techniques of a geographer, emphasizing historical processes and natural environment. With this approach, a global geographical pattern was uncovered in human behavior and social institutions, specifically those related to family and sexual life. Moreover, this global pattern strongly correlated to well-known patterns of desert climatology, and also to the migrations of peoples. The social variables I studied included infant and child treatments, adolescent rights, female status, types of marriage, kinship, inheritance rules, male-female relations, sexual behavior, cooperative or competitive tendencies, destructive aggressions, social hierarchies, religion, and so on. Cultures which tended to inflict pain and trauma upon infants and young children, punish young people for sexual expression, manipulate them into arranged marriages, subordinate the female, and otherwise greatly restrict the freedoms of young people and older females to the iron will of males, also tended to possess high levels of adult violence with various social institutions designed for expression of pent-up sadistic aggression. Such cultures I call the Patrist groups. It was found that at various times in their past histories, all Patrist cultures once possessed or were connected by a migration diffusion to large warrior kingdoms with extremely authoritarian and cruel cultural expressions such as divine kingship, ritual widow murder, human sacrifice, and sadistic ritual tortures of enemies, heretics, social rebels, and criminals. These Patrist groups contrast in almost every manner with the peaceful Matrist cultures, where child treatment and sexual relationships were of an entirely different character, being very gentle and pleasure-oriented. So, one thing, kind of a postscript I need to add about this. I was following DeMeo a little bit closer after the years following after I read this. And with the post 9/11 environment, because you see he wrote this book like right before then. He published his results here like right before 9/11. And 9/11 like changed everything. And DeMeo went through a period of, initially he supported like the invasion, the American led invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan and all these Patrist areas on the basis of them being Patrist. And then I think he kind of I think he might have like changed his idea about that eventually. And I'm not saying that to fault him in any way. Everyone the day after 9/11 had war on their mind. That's the way you get like triggered with things. Just like I'm sure everyone's dealing with the experience of being triggered after the events of this weekend. But one of the things that he stated later on And you can go look up Dame DeMeo up online and see for yourself where it's at. I haven't looked it up lately. He also regretted the categories of Patrist and Matrist, of just like making everything male and female, which is something he carries forward from Reich. But he said that that's a problem too, because that's like led to an en masse, let's like wipe out the male now. And suddenly the Matrist side ironically becomes Patrist as they seek to suppress the male side. And again, he said that before. Even him saying that is like, that's like from over like 10 years ago. So, I mean, I don't know what he would say now in response to pretty much just the effort to mass just culturally obliterate the male completely. He suggested that maybe authoritarian versus non-authoritarian would be a better way, and I try to stick with that as well. He points to a lot of the changes in here. Well, the scientific explanation for why humanity started moving in this direction is climate change, desertification. So that's another thing. This is another book that really discredits the modern green politics theories about climate change, and points out the fact that climate change has occurred as a natural phenomenon on planet Earth, as it certainly must on all planets that have a climate over time. But one of the questions that I had, which he understandably as a legitimate researcher doesn't go into, is the possibility of intervention from external sources, external intelligence sources, and the factors that they played in all of this. And this was a significant influence on me at the time that I wrote the Airbeth transmissions. So that's I started writing the Airbeth transmissions like around the same time that this book was a big influence on me, and that you see a pre 10,000 BC evidence of intervention, which we generally consider the from a Setian perspective, we call the gift of Set, the idea that intelligence was instilled in humanity by an external source, not just intelligence, but hugely enhanced capacity for self-awareness, and that this would have this resulted in the earlier Matrist cultures that DeMeo cites, because they extend back infinitely into history. Not infinitely, but it trails off at a certain point to where we can't date it, and it goes back to the Ice Age, and this is all the time period that Graham Hancock is talking about in his works, and that is the indication of a first intervention. And then what he cites on here with his research, 4000 BC, is what some have speculated, and what I tried to illustrate in Airbeth transmissions as a second intervention that was not as friendly as the first intervention, that resulted in patrism, because you also get into where did they learn all these like behaviors from? Like, where did these like rituals of circumcision and stuff, where did all this come from? Where they just find it out by experimenting, or and many of them do. So that time period of 4000 BC, that corresponds with, let's take for instance, the appearance of highly sophisticated Egyptian civilization, highly sophisticated Aztec civilization, highly sophisticated Persian civilization, so on and so forth. That this all appears like seemingly out of nowhere, like fully complex, bam. There's not a long period in Egypt's history where they practice their way up to making pyramids by other designs or what. No, they just start right out making these like intense pyramids and have this very complex society all in place. And before that is what we call the pre-dynastic period, which that would probably correspond with a Patrist period. So it's like the Patrist just appears like overnight. So it's the same problem that they have with explaining civilizations, is that it seems to come, you start speculating on it comes from an external source, transhuman source, or maybe Atlantis is another theory that comes, it's like another culture that they got it from all of a sudden. So DeMayon, the scientific reason for saying why these things change and just for the Patrist behaviors is because of desertification, which was definitely also happening. But the thing about desertification and climate change like that is that it happens over a long period of time. So there's problems with that theory as well. Ultimately, you just have to take all these theories and take the best from it, and then entreat upon your own personal journey of research and discovery to try and understand the concept of truth. So I guess to bring this all back to current events, and the weekend just gives us a really good example of the effects of Saharasia, and that it's all still going on there in the deserts of the old world. I mean, that is the birthplace of Saharasia, the birthplace of Patrism, authoritarianistic culture. And it's still going on, and it's spread out. The other thing I realized when I studied this, because the highly Patrist areas are in, Asia, is up in Asia and then down into Africa. The least Patrist or most Matrist areas are Europe, and especially British Isles, going over into the Americas. Now, the modern examples that they have of Matrism, that he finds of Matrism, are a Pacific Island culture, to be very, very Matrist, very nurturing and mother-oriented, and low incidence of violence, and very free marriage and sexuality type customs, and he admits, like, these are the last areas to be colonized by Patrists, and of course it's rapidly changing there. Oh, and some South American areas, he also talks about that. Like there's like real Matrist areas, tribes still in South America, but also there's extreme Patrist tribes, which you can trace back to, oh, that's the influence from the Aztecs and these Patrist cultures, which of course we link back up with the appearance of Saharasia Patrism along with Egypt and Persia and everything, the Egyptian dynasties. But one of the things that I realized at the same time I was working with a lot of these ideas, I reconnected with with my father's side of the family, who I'd been estranged from because my father died when I was like 9 years old. So I got reconnected with that side of the family and getting to know them, and that side of the family is Scottish, and you have a family history that traces back to coming to America. Scotch-Irish, I'm sorry, I should have said Scotch-Irish. Coming to America in the early 1800s as indentured servants. And what I noticed about my family and the whole structure of it is that, my grandmother like remarried a couple times and had different sons, and those are my uncles who are like, half brothers, but that they all centered around her, and that when she died it was a big funeral, and then the other side of the family, her would have been her sister-in-law from a previous marriage, took over like this matriarchal like kind of role, and I realized that even though I had been programmed through all of my college years to think about how Patrist culture is here in America, that my own experience of it is very Matrist. I mean, if you look at the incredible incidence of fatherlessness in our society right now, is that a sign of Patrism, or is that a sign that Patrism is dying? And maybe we're actually losing some of that. Our society is losing its ability to be a man, because that still means something, to say that you need to be a man, or I'm going to be a man about this. I'm going to take responsibility for this. And that's one of the shortcomings of the initial research of Saharasia, is that it never looks at any of the positive, noble virtues of maleness or patrism, or the important lessons that children, boys and girls, learn from fathers. And I mean, it's just all of the horrible violence and really bad drug abuse and behavior and everything with the youth of today is almost entirely coming from fatherless households and children who are raised in a mother-only household. So the lesson is that, nurturing is important, but fathers are important too. So I agree with DeMayo's later realization that Patrist Matris, in defining things that way, might have created more problems than it needed to. And that, again, as I looked at my own personal experience of existence, that I did come from a largely Matrist family structure, but did receive lots of really good teachings from the Patrist side. And, you know, even though my father died early, my father knew that he was going to die for many years because he had a disease. And so I understand he was making all these efforts to try and instill values like personal responsibility in me before he left. And although I did go through a rough punk rock period where I did flirt with, you know, bad things, and I do shudder about it, my conscience grieves on much of this, that, you know, I shudder to think how close I came to reaching a point of no turning back. But somehow those values that he had left there for me reappeared in those darkest hours. So, you know, so there's a value to that. There's value to having the concept of a male or father God or spiritual influence. There's an archetype for that. So I don't know, maybe it's an imbalance that causes people to fall the other way. But, you know, the other thing I'll say is that when people see, especially from a, you know, college-minded level, that, oh, there's this problem, there's too much patrism, then of course the response is, well, we'll change it by then overbalancing on the other side. And of course then that just creates other problems. So while I will say authoritarianism is definitely a big problem in the world, problem in that it causes lots of pain and death and human suffering and poverty. It impoverishes all of us to an extent because the endless wars are financed. I mean, they're really expensive, and they're financed by taxation and fiat currency, and it creates more inflation for all of us. They're all bad things, but I do not think there is a solution for eradicating all of it, because to eradicate it, it's like, you know, punching into the blob. You just become a part of it. You can't attack something like that directly. What you can do is, by observing it and observing your inner world in relation to it, you can make that step to bring your attention back into your inner world. And by creating in there, by unlocking this new cycle of nourishment that connects you with this greater cycle of nourishment from the absolute to planet Earth, that helps fulfill the cycle more than any sort of like protesting or joining the army or getting into becoming a corporate lawyer. Please don't become a corporate lawyer no matter what you do. But anyhow, I talked a lot longer about this than I thought I was. I thought this was going to be like a 20-minute thing, but there's just like so much in here, and I wanted to make sure, I know I've dropped a name before, but I wanted to make sure that I put this out here to everyone, because I do refer to this book. This book was a really big influence on me. I heard about it from Robert Anton Wilson talk, where he referred to it. So latter day Robert Anton Wilson was also very influenced by this. Robert Anton Wilson, as he was becoming less Marxist and more libertarian, was following the Saharasia vibe. So it's definitely worth looking into. You can still get it at Amazon. Look it up online. Study it on your own if it's something that you're interested in. And stay true. Go against the grain. And keep the dark fires burning.